Ask the Podcast Coach for December 24th, 2022.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that music that means, hey, it's Saturday morning. It's time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I'm Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com, and joining me right over there is the one and only Jim Collison from theaverageguy.tv. Jim, how's it going, buddy?
Greetings, Dave. Happy Saturday morning to you. Happy Christmas Eve as we're recording this, Christmas Eve, and happy Hat Day. We're working on some good-looking hats. My daughter knitted this last week. Like I said at the end of the show, hey, I need a new hat. And she's like, I got this. And
that's it.
Here we go. So looking good this morning.
You are looking good, man. Yours is much longer.
You as well.
Mine is.
Well, I asked her to make it longer on purpose because I wanted this. I wanted this kind of look where it kind of came like a sleeping hat kind of thing.
Nobody
wears those.
It's a very kind of Scrooge-ish kind of. If you had like one of those old things, that'd be rocking.
Yeah, nobody wears sleeping hats. Although it's been cold enough, like you. Right?
Yeah.
It's been cold enough out here in the United States and the Midwest to wear a sleeping hat. I've been wearing a hoodie to bed and putting the hood up just to stay warm. Yikes.
I went out last night thinking I was 15, and it was minus 20 with the wind chill, and my glasses froze. So that was fun.
No joke. People say that, and you're like, "Oh yeah, it was negative 32," and you don't believe them.
Yeah.
This week, believe them.
Yeah,
it's been cold, but you know what warms me up? You know
what? I was just thinking that.
I know.
A little Joe there for you.
Oh yeah,
that'll do it. And of course, that coffee pour is brought to you by Mark over at podcastbranding.co. If you need artwork, if you need a website, if you need a lead magnet, if you go, I don't understand what you mean when you say branding, then Mark is the guy to go to. The beautiful thing is he is an award-winning graphic artist, and he's also a podcaster. So that whole thing where you go, it's kind of like it's a radio show, but it's not. You don't have to do that because Mark understands podcasting. And what he's going to do is sit down with you one-on-one, really get the vibe of your show. He's going to listen to an episode. He's going to talk with you and really understand what is going on and kind of what vibe you're trying to put out there. And then he goes to town on creating some sort of artwork or, again, website or a PDF or whatever you need to look good. Because remember, they're going to see you before they hear you, and Mark is going to make you look so great and so professional. I get compliments on the School of Podcasting stuff all the time. I've had somebody tell me that they listened because they liked my logo. So go see Mark over at podcastbranding.co.
I finally figured out he says cappuccino hold the foam. I finally figured that because that's what you do.
I thought he was saying hold the phone. I'm like,
that's what I thought. That's what I thought too. Big thanks to our friend Dan Lefebvre over there, Based on a True Story podcast at basedonatruestorypodcast.com. Not only a fantastic mug, but a fantastic podcast if you're looking for something new to listen to during this holiday season, and why wouldn't you be? Check it out. Some episodes, I mentioned this last week, The Man Who Invented Christmas. You want to know, is that based on a true story? Head out to basedonatruestorypodcast.com. Thanks for Dan. Thanks for your sponsorship of the podcast. And Dave, one more thanks. The coffee this morning provided by Chris, our very own Chris, who's out in the chat room, who from time to time sends me Island coffee. And if you haven't had Island coffee, they're out of Richardson, Texas. Pretty amazing stuff. It's kind of the exclusive coffee that I buy now. He's got me hooked on it. They have a green room blend that's just delicious. I always keep a couple bags. I think anything over $50 is free shipping. So Chris, thanks for sending me the coffee as well. Island coffee.
There you go. Good stuff.
Put the link to that in the chat room.
Yeah, absolutely. Jim, predictions for 2023. What do you want to do here today? I wasn't sure.
Well, let's do a follow up like from last week.
From last week, how are we doing?
Yeah.
Well, the first thing I discovered, I thought it was going to be okay for a couple days. I had my camera plugged into one, USB port on the Mac Mini. Then it dawned on me, oh wait, if I'm going to be doing these and all my recordings and making videos for the School of Podcasting, I'm going to have to plug the Rodecaster into that. So that was the end of my USB. And then I went to do something on OBS, and I pressed the button on my Stream Deck, and I'm like, oh, I'm out of ports. So that was, and here's the thing, you're going to hear about this in January. I'm going to talk about this on the School of Podcasting, but you have to figure out whatever you want to get into, whether it's, a camera, a hub, interface. What do you need it to do? And for me, I was like, I'm out of ports. And I thought if I could get an SD card, that would be great, because I maybe eventually will be taking video out of my camera, transferring it that way. And so I was like, okay. And all these different parts, and we're talking like $400 for the CalDigit T4, blah, and it had 18 ports. I'm like, that's a lot of ports. Don't know if I need 18. And it does, it slices, it dices, it even juliennes. And I was like, And I was like, yeah, I just need it to give me more ports. And then if it could give me more ports, because a lot of them are like, the big feature was like, and this has 65, 85, this has 95 watts to charge your laptop. And I'm like, that's not me. I have a Mac Mini. I'm not going any.
Important though. Yeah. That's important for some, that dock will charge laptops. Right?
Yeah.
That is important.
Then they made all these, and then I found out my PC was plugged into a hub. And I was like, I totally forgot I had this. So I unplugged it from the PC, plugged it into the Mac, and it worked. And then I plugged my camera in and instantly turned into Mac's headroom, for those of you that remember. In other words, I was just very choppy. And I was like, And so I tried a couple other ports on it. No, it just, for whatever reason, the amount of data, it must be USB.
It was maybe an original USB 1.
Yeah.
Maybe?
So I was like, okay, so I need, it's officially now, if I'm going to do camera stuff, I'm going to need a better port. And so I looked and finally found Jim Harold from jimharold.com. He's the king of paranormal podcasts. He said CalDigit makes really good stuff. And that was the one that had 18 ports. And I'm like, yeah, I don't need 18 ports though. And so I found this one. And what's cool about it, you plug it in. It's, here it is. It's the CalDigit Element Hub. And it gave me four USB hubs with 10 gigabytes. So it's a super fast USB hubs. And it gave me, I lose one Thunderbolt on the back of my Mac Mini, but it gave me 3 more. And I was like, man, if I want more ports, this is it. And so where the other ones were like really like $300-400, this was closer to 2, which again, my wallet's like going, okay, I'm not liking this whole Macintosh thing. Every time I turn around, I'm sneezing money away.
Well, it takes a little, you got to figure out, you got to kind of figure out what you were thinking about going with a dock. You could have done that.
Yeah.
You did what I told you to do, which was start using it and let's figure out what you need before you just go buy it preemptively. In this case, you kind of like, hey, what I'm really, really short is USB ports.
Well, and the other thing is they make a lot of these docks that are made like, it looks like it's just a little thin Mac Mini. It sits right underneath of it. Yeah. And they had SD cards and they had, but it would be like old USB ports. And I was like, I kind of need fast ones. And I looked and I found this one that was really cool. It had one fast USB port and a bunch of other stuff. And you could put a hard drive in it. And I was like, oh, now you got my attention. And this is where I went over and because it sounded like a company that's maybe not based here in the US. So I went over and I saw where they had a community portal and there was a lot of people going, this isn't working anymore. This isn't working anymore. And it was all about the hard drive, which is one of the reasons why I was going to buy it.
Right.
And so I went, yeah, we're not going there. So it's not as cool looking because I'll give them that. All these ones, you just stick it underneath your Mac Mini and it's beautiful and your ports are right there. And I went, yeah, I'm not shooting videos of my studio. I'm like, this is, I got a cable sticking out the front, a bunch sticking out the back. I'm like, but it works and we're good to go. Yeah, so we actually have somebody waiting to come online. So let me turn up on Wisdom here. We got TP. I like music and political ideologies, red tape. I'm also a writer. All right. So guest is joining. So TP, thanks for coming up here. Oh, I got to wait till they come up. There we go. TP, thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
What can we help you with?
Yeah, seem like, experts, and, you guys seem good. I just have like one question for y'all. Am I supposed to enjoy jacking myself off?
All right. Well, thank you so much for that.
and Baba Booey, wisdom delivers.
And Merry Christmas.
Wondering how long that would take.
Yeah, and we will block the user.
Put a timestamp on there. So
Yeah, I don't think that's going to be. That'll be on the video, but it won't be in the audio. That's
Merry Christmas.
Yeah. All right.
Well, Dave, back to your some important matters. Back to your PC here for a second. One of the things, and I'd encourage you to, you were looking at buying a kind of a hub that had everything included in that, and there were some complaints that if one, hey, the hard drive's not particularly good in this. And that's the problem with buying some all-in-one devices, is that if one part of it goes wrong, what do we do? Well, okay, that part doesn't work anymore. And I kind of prefer getting those devices that, it's great to have a drive attached to the Mac for Time Machine. That's great, right? That Time Machine backup is amazing. But for the regular storage, I'd get that off on some other device. I get that to a computer, to a Windows computer or something on the network, a NAS. For some folks, they may have a Synology or a QNAP or some of those kinds of NASs. Get that storage where it belongs. In a lot of cases, your files, once you're done working with them, so you told me this morning your workflow is going to be, you're going to produce the episodes, work and edit the files locally. So that file's going to be on your Mac. And that's the smartest thing, because that speed of the local hard drive and the memory and the CPU are just unprecedented. You don't want to move that off yet. So once you get it done, then you'll move that onto your own network somewhere. So it'll be local for you. And then you'll back it up to the cloud. So you've got a copy off site. And that's a real smart way of making sure you're doing the right, you wouldn't want to move the file to a NAS first and then work off of it off the NAS, because that's going to be kind of slow. So that gives you, I think, for podcasters, identifying your workflow and then maximizing it based on speed of what you have. A lot of folks are working, maybe they're recording off of a laptop. That laptop may not be the best place to edit those files, just because oftentimes it has an underpowered CPU, especially if it's a Windows laptop. It has an underpowered CPU. It doesn't have enough memory in some cases. That may warrant moving that off onto a desktop somewhere, working on it there, and then moving it to your file storage. So just gives you some ideas of, kind of think through your workflow and say, where's the most efficient place for these files to be? Yeah.
So what I've done is I've always had these. I'll create a folder called podcasts. And then if you have more than one, I'll have another folder with, like, I have a folder for Ask the Podcast Coach. And in that folder, so it's podcasts, Ask the Podcast Coach, there's a folder called production. And it has the whole Let's Get Ready to Podcast and any other artwork, anything I would need to do the show, to produce the show, hence the folder production. And so what I'm doing is I'm moving all the production folders onto the Mac, and I will make an episode there because I've got everything I need there to make the episode. And when it's done, I will take that, I'll have a folder for that episode, and I will move that back to the hard drive, the portable hard drive. And so I'm using the local hard drive to create it. Once it's done, once it's published, get it off the machine. That's the other thing I forgot, is just how nice it is. It's like clean sheets when you don't have like just rubble of files.
Now keep it that way, Dave.
That's the plan.
Work hard to keep it that way.
Yeah.
Like I do everything I can to keep my Mac desktop clear. I don't do that on Windows. My Windows environment has stuff all over the place, but on the Mac, because it's my production box, I try to keep that as clean as possible. I think too, I think Chris Nessie had said, there might be a price difference in apps between Windows and Mac. When you move to the Mac, you're going to pay a little bit more in some cases for apps. That's okay. You're keeping your Windows box around. So this is the nice thing about having both environments and choosing to be diverse in that way, is if you need to go to your Windows box, you still can. It's still there, right? You're just not using that for production day in and day out. Yeah. Speaking of Chris Nessie, one of the first things I did was, and I forget the name of the program, I want to say it's like Lensio or something like that, it's supposed to make like avatars. Chris is making some really great, it's a photo editing software
And I saw Chris, man, it was like probably a couple weeks ago on Instagram. It was like, I'm making these with Lensa something. And like literally the first thing I was like, wait a minute, I'm on a Mac. I can get that Lensa. Yeah. I haven't bought it yet. Apparently you have to like do the pro version to do the cool stuff that Chris, like look at Chris's avatar. Like that's cool.
Yeah.
And he'd take a picture of yourself, and it's, so thanks to Chris for that, chrisnesi.com, ChrisNesi for that. That's a cool program. And it's been, here's the thing. And then I want to, somebody has a question here. I think this is true. I think podcasting, being a podcaster, makes you more adept, I guess, for handling speed bumps, because everything I saw on the internet was like, oh, just plug in this hard drive. When you plug it into your Mac, it's going to go, hey, I can't read this. I need to erase it. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I grab my hard drive, I unbox it, throw it in, plug it in, and it's like, okay, this is read only. And I'm like, no, you're not supposed to say read only. You're supposed to say, click here to erase. And I was like, huh. Now, I could have, like, was like, oh, no, it's broken. It's blah, blah. Oh, it's, wow, I hate technology. It's not my friend. Instead, I went to Google and said, how do you format a hard drive on a Mac? And it's like, oh, go to the utilities, blah, 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 disk utility, click on it, click on erase. And I did, and it was fine. So I think in the past, I think just the fact that, we have things that go not the way they're supposed to, when the guest shows up and you can't get them to connect their mic or whatever. I don't know. Jim, do you think that somehow the fact that, because podcasting isn't always smooth, that we kind of get used to just like, all right, hold on. Well, something's gone left of center. We've seen this before, Yeah,
I think you get quick on your feet. You're good at troubleshooting. You start like, okay, I got to work through this. There's some logical thinking to it. Yeah. No, I think it's a good exercise. I think it's a good exercise for old guys like us to keep our brains functioning well. Cause it's, you never know when you're going to get a Baba Booey out of the,
yeah, you never know.
It's been a while.
And exactly. And you just kind of go, and moving on.
And we're going to move on.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
Well, let's see here.
A couple comments out there in the chat.
Yeah. What switcher are we using? We're using StreamYard. I'm sure you have shared the info before, but I'm new to the show. Thank you, and letting you know you need to answer. Thank you, and let me know if you need an answer to that. That scholar. Yeah, it's I love StreamYard. I'm there. We use Crowdcast at Libsyn, and Crowdcast does a huge job, so much better in terms of marketing. Like they give you stats on, X amount of people signed up, X amount of people showed up live, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, but yeah, I love StreamYard. It's super simple. And all the stuff I'm doing with the slides and all, that's all here. The fun thing was usually I have the slides ready to go. And like here, when we'll do this later, but it's super simple. And I was like, oh, I forgot to have these ready ahead of time. And it's like, nope, just click a button and they're there. So it's, I think I know I'm on the pro plan. I want to say it's 40 something a month. I think the regular,
their minimum plan's 20.
Yeah.
Right now.
But it's pretty handy. And then Daniel says, everybody's giving me Mac programs to try now. I found Diffusion Bee. It's a free way to run the stable diffusion image generating editing AI on a Mac. I'll have to check it out.
That got real popular really fast. Those images, those AI based face for images got super popular on Facebook and some other social media sites. Doesn't surprise me that there's some ability to do that there locally. There was
we talked about, AI art, man, a couple months ago. And I remember I went and had the whatever tool we were using to make the artwork, and it gave me somebody with 6 fingers. And I was like, not quite ready yet. I did see there was somebody selling like, build a course in 5 minutes and make $1 million kind of thing. And they said, we have something that is life-changing. And of course it was, according to them, and you'll probably hear me talk about this again in the future, was they have this AI tool and they asked it how to create the course that they wanted to create. And he goes, it's like it built the course for me. Now we can turn around and sell it. And I'm like, so great. We're now going to take AI stuff, which again, I'm not anti-AI. I'm just like, almost every time I use it, it needs a little tweaking. And I'm like, so I'm now going to take the not vetted, not fact-checked information from a robot and sell it to you. And I was like, yeah, I'm not but boy, what I love about it is when you think about that, it's almost like, look, you don't have to change the way you eat or exercise and you will lose weight. And you're like, sign me up. And this is like, look, you don't have to do anything. Just type a couple sentences into this thing and it will build the thing for you. And I was just like, really? Are people? The other thing I heard this week, and I need to go back and check the date on this because I've not heard it in a very long time. And that was somebody saying you only have 8 weeks to get into New and Noteworthy on a podcast about podcasting. And I was like, when was this released? Because they were like, this is what you got to do to launch. You have to get into New and Noteworthy. And I was like, please tell me this is old. And I don't think it is. And I was just like, we still really? That's what we're doing. So it'd be crazy. So,
I mean, it's not like they're hosting their podcast on Anchor or anything like that. So, I mean, that's not.
I mean, I have to go back and look. They might be. How's your head doing? Mine is starting to itch.
No, well, mine's toasty. This is custom. So like it is, my daughter knitted this custom. And we bought extra because that's the reason I had her knit this is because those always make my head itch.
Yeah.
And so I was like, it'd be nice just to have one that didn't. So if you want to remove yours, that's fine. But I'm gonna stick with mine because it's super cozy. My head it's warm. It's also having the effect of holding, I always have to adjust my earbuds during the program. And now that I've got this nice cover on it, earbuds are staying in just fine. So maybe I'll start podcasting with just a headband from now on out, just do like the basketball players do,
Oh yeah.
Headband on. Yeah. Or a hat, Santa hat all year long. How long before people you think would make fun of me for having a Santa hat all year long? They think they would be like, Jim, it's March. Ditch the hat. What do you think?
You just say, I identify as Santa. I am Santa. Don't make fun. No shame me. Don't throw shade on my Santa hat.
There's no Christmas shade.
Yes. I'm not sure. I did go out and mic drop.
That's great.
I did go out and try to find some questions. There are people, for the record, we should also say this, as it is the day before Christmas, pretty much from now through, I would say, next Wednesday. Like, don't expect a lot from companies. Like, if there's anybody working, it's a skeleton crew. And in many cases, they're not working. And it's kind of a weird thing because you have time off because, well, it's the holidays. So you do your stuff. And then, that's where like me and Uncle Google are like this right now. And we're good. We're best buds. Yeah. And so, and it's there was the other thing I did on the 23rd. I went to Walmart twice. And the first time was insane because everybody knew it was going to get cold. So everybody's buying milk and stuff like that. Second time I went in, I broke my toaster. And I make kind of an egg sandwich every morning as breakfast. And I was like, I need my toaster. And it's 10 o'clock. Make a long story short, I run to Walmart, buy a toaster. I'm home by 11 eating toast. And I think sometimes we just do stuff without realizing that, like, Jim is in Nebraska and it looks like he's sitting in the same room with me. We sound phenomenal. Like, we kind of take technology and things for granted. And I was just one of those, I'm like, I don't think I could have, I don't know how long Walmart's been around, but like, if this had been like 30 years ago, everything would have been closed at 10 o'clock. And, so, the fact that we're doing a lot of the stuff we're doing now just seems like, second nature or whatever. And, maybe we need to take a second to go, wow, I live in a really cool time with technology.
I got contacted from one of our customers yesterday afternoon. It was like, hey, I'm trying to file something with support and the chat isn't working. And we turn our chat on and off kind of based on resources that we have available. I was like, it's a Friday before Christmas. It's probably closed. Like So yeah, I actually appreciate that. You and I both do very similar jobs from that standpoint of working with customers all week long. And it is kind of nice when you get to, I am expecting a few pings over the weekend with not everybody celebrates Christmas. So there's some who are like, it is kind of nice that it's on a Sunday from a support standpoint because people kind of expect that anyway with it. But yeah, be kind. If you're doing your last minute shopping today, be kind to people. Yeah. Like they're working for you today. Like that's going to be, I'm going to go out as soon as we're done with this. I'm going to go run some errands, drop off some cardboard, because somehow we amassed like 1,000 pounds of cardboard over the last 3 weeks, right? We got this big stack over there of it.
80% of it is Amazon boxes.
I'm going to see 99% of it's Amazon boxes. I'm going to sneak in a store. I got a few errands to run. And I think I'm just going to thank everybody that I see in the store. I'm going to wear this hat, by the way, too.
Are you?
And, okay. For sure. Yeah. Well, just say, hey, thank you. Merry Christmas.
Are we ready to roll the dice one more time? I don't know who it is.
Yeah.
We have a guest waiting.
Yeah.
It's not TP. It's Win Charles. Well, there you go. Somebody we actually know. Even better. So.
Good. We
won't we don't have to worry about right on. Talking about naughty bits. Win, how are you?
Hi, you guys.
How are you?
I'm good. I just wanted to hop in and say Happy Merry Christmas to both you and Jim, because I know you guys are working. Dave, I know you were working hard behind the scenes up until I don't know when at Lipson, but I just wanted to say Happy Merry Christmas. And yes, Google, to everyone who's trying to figure out tech support tomorrow, don't jump on Google. Don't ask Lipson. Don't ask the average guy, please. Don't ask Gallup because they're taking the day off. Go ask Google and wait until Wednesday, you guys, to contact tech support. And yeah, these guys are Amazon, FedEx, Best Buy. I tried to go to Best Buy the other day, and that was a complete disaster and a half. And so, for those of you that know me, I have a physical disability, but that was a complete disaster and a half. So, please be patient with all of us, and please be patient with all of us that do interview shows, because some of us to have a little time off.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to hop in and say have a Merry Christmas, and I'll catch you guys next year. That's a little scary.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, I'll catch you guys after Christmas, but mainly next year as far as working purposes.
Sounds great. Thank you
guys.
Oops, I'm hitting the wrong button. There we go. Thank you so much. I'm trying to figure out because
thanks, Win. Oh, hold on, Win. Win, thank you. Appreciate you jumping in here and saying those things to us.
You're welcome.
It is nice. Appreciate it.
You are welcome.
Thanks, Win.
You are welcome.
Have a Merry Christmas.
Yep.
It's 11 o'clock.
It's 11 o'clock. Did you hear that? Or is that just me? All right.
No.
That is another thing I really like about my Mac, and it's really interesting, is the fact that I can have my clock basically chime. And so I've chosen to have a British man let me know, and it can be every quarter hour, every half hour. So it just let me know it's 11 o'clock. And I was like, but what that does, what's really handy about that, and obviously you could use your phone or whatever to do that. It's great for going, oh, holy crap. How long have I been going down this rabbit hole?
Yeah.
It's pretty handy that way. So it's fun.
Well, love to get those calls from people like Win. That's always nice to have that kind of encouragement and those kinds of listeners. The numbers are down a little bit this morning, but not as down. I thought we'd have 5 to be honest with you. It's Christmas Eve, right? People are like, Sarah came down, my wife came down a couple days ago, and she's like, hey, we're trying to figure out when we're going to celebrate Christmas with the kids. Are you open Christmas Eve morning? I think, no. She's like, did you seriously schedule a podcast? I'm like, well, nothing was on the calendar, right? You didn't tell me. So we ended up moving it to last night. But we appreciate you guys listening today. Many of you will be listening after the fact, and we hope you've had a great Christmas season, great Christmas time, all those holidays that are through. But we do appreciate those folks joining us live.
Yeah. I found this question, and it said, what's your go-to resource when it comes to audio editing? I'd like to learn and improve my editing skills. I'm still quite new at this. And so, Jim, I think you just use Audacity.
Well, I actually do that. I don't do a lot of editing in this, in the stuff that I do. So I actually just use iMovie on the Mac to get it done. And then if I need to, I'll use Audacity to clean it up. If I need to jump in there and get it clean, Audacity works great on the Mac for me. So, yep. Audacity is what I use. Yeah,
I'm a big Hindenburg guy, and then if I need to kind of pull out my scalpel and cut out a bunch of stuff, and it's really just because it's the first one I ever used. I use Sony SoundForge, which is on the PC.
Dave, the best one is probably the one that you're currently using. I think everybody thinks, I'm using this, but I should probably be using that. And you kind of have to think, the learning curves on some of these are pretty steep.
Yeah.
And you may be better off just investing a little bit more time in the one you currently know and spend some time with some tutorials or spend some time asking some questions about it. Cause they're not that hard. I've been using Audacity for, 12 years. So I kind of know it pretty well, but you can get a lot of information out there. You can get a lot of help, a lot of tutorials on YouTube. There's always folks willing to do that for you. So spending a few minutes learning what you currently know may be actually the best investment that you can make.
It's funny you say that, because when I originally started using Camtasia, like literally decades ago, they didn't have a Mac version. And when they did, it wasn't very good and yada, yada, yada. And so I was like, I'm going to be making videos on a Mac. And I was like, ugh. And I actually didn't even look at Camtasia because I was, the last time I checked, it wasn't very good. It didn't have half the features, etc. And I, years ago, bought ScreenFlow. And I went to upgrade my ScreenFlow and was like, hold on a second. And I went back and looked at Camtasia. Oh, they've taken their Mac version to where it's the same as the PC version. So, yeah, whatever you've purchased, take the time. Last night I was going through and watching Todoist videos. Todoist is a to-do list kind of manager thing. And I do this every year, and I will be super organized as we launch the first year. And come April, May, I'll have my first thing on my to-do list will be look at your to-do list, because I'll just get away from it. But I was like, all right, I have this product. I need to learn how to do it, and then just have the discipline to do it. Chris says, here's my advice: record, edit, and play. Find your style. Don't be afraid to visit YouTube University too. Yeah. And one of the things I always do when I go to YouTube University is I look at when was the video made, because there are times when I'll see things I'm like, this video is 3 years old. And depending on what you're looking at, because some things, are evergreen, but if it's a software thing, I'm like, is there one that's maybe a little was made in the last, months or so?
Well, and you can use the advanced search to help with that. If you just do a search and you bring back a regular search, I think it prioritizes popularity over recentness, if that's the right word to use. And so you'll get older because they've been around longer. They've got bigger numbers. I've been finding this out. I've been working with, I bought that Quest 2 headset for VR, and I've been watching all these VR videos, how to take advantage of it, the best apps for it, those kinds of things. And everything I get on search is 2 years old, because that's when this thing came out. And that's when a lot of the early videos were made. And those are the most popular ones. Well, lots have changed in that space, in that VR space. They've gone wireless since then. You don't have to have a cable anymore. The platforms are always updating. So in this particular case with VR, your advice is really, really good, because the best videos that I want are the ones that have been made in the last 3 months. So you can go into advanced search. It'll say how recent, and you can kind of select a criteria for that, and then get those videos back that are newer, as opposed to ones that may not have the most current information that you're looking for.
Yeah. The other thing to keep in mind, I had a member of the School of Podcasting reach out to me, and he's like, "Hey, I saw your tutorial on gear and stuff." He goes, "I'm not really looking to spend a ton of money." He goes, "I just don't want the starter stuff." He goes, "Because it's, maybe not that good." And I said, and so what I did while we were together, in fact, I'll do it now.
Dave is changing his microphone.
I plugged in the Samson Q2U, and I automatically hear more S's and T's. It's a little clearer and things like that. And I said, but for a $60 microphone, I go, this really doesn't sound that bad. I said, the only reason I have an SM7B is because it was on sale, and, I run a podcast school, and somebody asked me a question about it, and I was like, I should probably go buy one. At least that's what I would tell my wife if I had one, right? You gotta have that reason. But he was like, oh, that really doesn't sound that bad. And I'm like, no, just because it's the entry level. I go, now I would never recommend the little plastic stick microphone that comes with your laptop and things like that. I go, that I wouldn't recommend. And I said, and I would have to hear it first before I recommended a headset, because headsets are usable, but there's no bass to them and things like that. So keep in mind that, as we talk about knowing your gear and things like that, just because, we always think, we don't always, but many people think you have to spend lots of money to sound great, and you kind of don't. I always say, if you're doing a solo show, get this microphone and Audacity and you're ready to go. Go get a media host and off you go to the races. So
yeah, I did an interview while you're switching that. I'll say we did an interview a couple of weeks ago, and the host was down in Mexico, so the weather was nice, and she actually was outside on the patio. So she'd set up with a microphone on the patio, and besides the occasional bird chirping that we heard, the audio was actually excellent. That was some of the best audio I've ever gotten from her, because there wasn't reverberation bouncing off. The room she's normally in is hard tiled. They don't have a lot of soft things on the walls or a lot of soft furniture around it. And I said to her, like, let's do this more often. You sound great, because she is outside. Now, I do like you on that Samsung mic. You sound good. You have a higher, the clarity is a little bit better for me on that than it is on the, what are you currently using?
This is the Shure SM7B. It's the Joe Rogan microphone. So that'll make
it look sexy. It looks sexy.
Yeah. I've always thought I sound muffled on this. So, and also, I'm not sure if it's fixed or not, but the weird hiss problem, it kept coming up, and I actually switched channels, and I think it's gone. I have to double check here. But I always like my voice on the RE320. I think the SM7B is muffled, for lack of a better phrase, but I've had other people go,
muddled is more of the word I would use.
Yeah.
But it's not bad. Don't get me wrong. That's a nice mic.
Yeah.
And by the way, I did hear that hissing in the recording last week. I went back and listened to what we said. So hopefully you got that fixed. But the just a little more muddled. Now my ears like the crisper higher. It could be because I'm deaf in some ranges. So that's very possible as well.
Yeah. Speaking of Christmas, some of us will have a better Christmas than others. Some of us bought ourselves a new car, and a new puppy in my son's case. Yeah, new puppies are they're fun, and if you have the ones that don't sleep through the night yet, they're like a baby. I remember when we got a puppy, and it was 3:00 in the morning, and it's got to go potty, and it doesn't want to pee in the cage, and you're like, oh, let's get a puppy. It'll be fun. You're like, okay.
Kind of like starting another podcast. You're like, oh, I'm responsible for this thing.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah, everybody should participate in this. I will take them. Let me mark this real quick. If you want to jump in, you could do this, or go to schoolofpodcasting.com/question. The question of the month, Jim, if you had to pick one, and if you say, I take the fifth, I understand, because I realize you're not getting any time to think about this. But you can only pick one. What's your favorite podcast for 2022, and why?
That's a good question.
That is a good question, isn't it? I tell you what, while you're thinking about that, why don't we thank our awesome supporters? And you can be an awesome supporter by going to askthepodcastcoach.com/support. And I have a typo on that slide. Alex. That doesn't work. I did this morning and she
the male version of the male version of the AI.
Well, I have a, it sounds, the woman in the tube sounds like a butler. Now I have a male English voice. Anyway, I asked her this morning and she picked Glenn the Geek Hebert from horseradionetwork.com. He's one of our, to be a featured awesome supporter, you have to be in the $20 plan. And that's basically what I have in, it's an Alexa blueprint. And I just go pick a random blah, blah, blah. I also found we might bring her back. I found out how to run anything. Like right now, I'm like, how do I get sound out of my PC? So I run it out of my headphone jack into the Rodecaster, into an adapter, and in the Rodecaster, tell it that it's a line in. And that fixes a lot of the weird noise that we used to get because that's what I was doing with the woman in the tube from Amazon. But Ask the Podcast Coach runs on Podpage. If you'd like to try Podpage, go over to trypodpage.com. It's the easiest way. I had somebody this week that was kind of asking about it, and I just went over and took their RSS feed and put it in there, and I go, here, this is what it would look like. And they're like, how did you do that? I go, it took me all of like 45 seconds. Just here, copy, paste this in there, put your email in. It's super easy. And of course, there's if you go to learnpodpage.com, that's my free course on that. And if you go, hey, I want more of, Mr. Cratchit there in his hat, Jim Collison, go over to Home Gadget and check out Home Gadget Geeks at theaverageguy.tv. If you want to start a podcast, I would love to help you. In fact, now you can put Dave in your pocket. It's all there at schoolofpodcasting.com. And if you'd like to be an awesome supporter, go over to askthepodcastcoach.com/support. So he's had some time to think about it.
Yeah. I'm glad you gave me a minute.
You could only pick one.
Probably the one I listened to the most this year, it would be my favorite one. And it's the two guys. So, well, first of all, my favorite podcast is doing this one. Let's just be really clear about that. I love being on this one on Saturday mornings, but the one I love listening to is called One Nation Under Whiskey. And it's been by the way, they do every week, they do an interview. It's 2 hours. It's they spend 30 minutes chatting. Then they do an hour-long interview, and then they do 30 minutes. The content is relevant, and it's funny, and it's not boring. And so I listen. I look forward to it. I'm disappointed when there isn't one there. I look forward to all 2 hours. Then they do a 35-minute extra that they put in between those 2-hour interviews. So it just goes to show, and they've got tens of thousands of listeners, maybe even more. They've gotten fairly big.
And what's it called again?
One Nation Under Whiskey.
Nice. And and what's the big takeaway from the show?
It's more about the industry than it is about the whiskey. Like they spend a little time talking about tasting and some of those kinds of things. And they're sipping drams, as they would say. They're sipping drams during the show. But it's not like a tasting show. They're talking more about the industry and what's going on in it and what's happening around the world. And whiskey is a global industry. As we think of all the things, I think most people think of it as Scotch, right? They think, the nasty peated. Well, there's a whole, of course, Kentucky produces bourbon. That's a whiskey.
Right.
Japanese whiskey is super popular now. And there's a lot of good whiskeys coming out around the world. They spend a lot of time talking about the business of it as opposed to just hey, let's drink this stuff. And they do. Don't get me wrong. It's interesting in that way, and they're funny. They have good chemistry together. They're funny together. One's a younger guy, one's an older guy. The older guy's always making fun of the younger guy. It's a good Josh and Jason are the two hosts, and it's just a good podcast to listen to. Yeah. What about you?
I'm not going to reveal mine. I have one, but here's and I will do that on the show. But here's the thing. I was going to say, because it's time to say it. I haven't said it yet. I was going to say James Cridlin because who? Yeah,
keep mentioning this guy. I have no idea who he is.
I was because James is almost the first voice I hear every morning because he's in my Woman from the Tube, and in terms of like what one do I listen to the most, he's definitely that. But this will be out Monday. The show that I'm saying did a clip show, which takes a huge amount of time. In fact, they didn't. One of their listeners did. And they did a show that was like, here's a bunch of best of clips. And all of a sudden, in like whatever, an hour or so, you're reminded of the value you get from the podcast. And I was like, man, I forgot all the good stuff I've learned from this show. And I was like, and that's when I was like, you know what? No, that's my favorite show. So, and it's just content I can't get anyplace else, done in an entertaining way. Again, I think entertaining is always kind of part of it, but you'll hear what that show is on Monday School of Podcasting. If you want to jump in, it's askthepodcastcoach.com/join. If you want to leave it here, or just go to schoolofpodcasting.com/question, and I will take them till the end of today, because I'm actually starting to work on that. And I've got quite a few. It's always a longer episode, but it's always interesting for me. I mean, it's on one hand, you might find podcasts that you want to start listening to. I love hearing the why. That's really why I'm doing it, because you want to do more of whatever it is that's getting people to stick around.
Yeah. Well, like, so in my case, if I were to think of two behind it, of course, in years past, I've gone out there, but Cigar Authority is one of those podcasts. They're 2 hours every single week. And then I listen to Windows Weekly, just so you don't think it's all bourbon and whiskey and in cigars. I listen to Windows Weekly, which has recently gone to like 245. Like they're getting longer, they're going longer, not shorter. And I because it's interesting to me, I listen to the whole thing. So that kind of breaks down the, there's a few podcasts that I listen to are a little bit shorter from that standpoint. Actually, my short content I watch on YouTube. So is that a podcast? It doesn't really matter. Just to be 100% honest, it doesn't matter. The content I watch on YouTube, I want to watch because of the visual content associated with it. But make the content as long as you want it to be. Yeah. Like don't worry about it. Your audience will let you know if it's too long, and in most cases they, that's why they're listening. I like it long.
I've been participating in a thing called the Podcast Power Hour. It's on Monday nights on Twitter Spaces. And Greg from Indie Drop-In, we've talked about indiedropin.com here. He said, "Hey, can I give you some feedback?" And I go, "Dude, you apparently don't know me. I love feedback, good and bad." And he said, he goes, "There are times when I tune into your show," and he goes, "You always have something before like the main event. Like a lot of times I'll say, okay, I like to start off with a quick podcast tip or a quick because of my podcast story." And he was like, "Yeah, I'm always having to," he goes, "I tuned in for whatever the topic is, and you start off, even though it's short." And I was like, that's a good point. So that's something I will take into consider, because usually what I do is a quick tip. So here's something of value. Then that gives me a place to stick my kind of pre-roll ad. And then I get into the big topic. So I was like, that's not bad feedback. So we'll see if I can work that into it. But it's been interesting because I have a survey out. In fact, we'll probably do one in January for this show. Although we get a lot of feedback here on the show in the chat room. But it's always interesting just seeing what people are looking for. I have had some people say that the School of Podcasting is a little long. And I was like, because it used to be 20 minutes. They said it was too short. So then I moved it to 30. 30 kind of became 40. And now we're always kind of clocking in around 50. And I'm getting people going, a little long or a little boring. Long. I mean, that's it. I think
if it's good, I don't think length matters.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
I mean, people will freaking binge Netflix, stuff when it comes out for 10 or 12 hours. Yeah. My daughter was telling me yesterday when she watched Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Is that the right show? She watched 5 seasons of that one weekend. And I was like, look, people will do it. So Dave, I think the decode on that is it's not too long. It's you're stretching out the content maybe a little bit farther than you need to.
Yep.
Right?
Well, and it's funny you say that. Everybody, we had our Christmas last weekend, and everybody was talking about Yellowstone. And I said, really, I've never watched it. And I thought they were going to throw me out in the snow. Like, what do you mean? How dare you? And I said, is it really that good? And they're like, oh. And so it sounds like me, like my brother's never watched Breaking Bad. And I'm like, oh, come on. And so I started watching Yellowstone, and I think I'm up to 5 episodes. And so far, I go, let me get this straight. It's a really rich family that kind of all hate each other. They get away with murder because they're rich. I'm like, isn't that Succession and Dallas? If we go back, and I'm like, it's really not that original, with cowboy hats though, and really beautiful scenery. But everybody's like, oh no, keep watching, So
there's a new mini series. It's got like 9 parts called Star Wars that I haven't watched yet. And I'm just wondering, should I start with the first episode? Is that the best one to get started with? So I'm looking forward to watching it this Christmas.
Yeah. Daniel says, I for one, don't care how long the SOP episodes are. And it's one of the few shows I do not skip when there are interviews, because Dave is good at bringing out relevant and unique information. Here's the fun thing. The last episode I did was with Neil Headley, who from Knop Studios. And I really thought, I said, hey, let's, we're all talking about swapping promos. Like, how do you make a good ad? And I really thought he'd say, oh, well, here are some ways to start off. And then here's how you hook people and blah, blah, blah. And like halfway through the interview, I'm really getting ready to stop the interview because he's a friend of mine, and go, Neil, like, we're not getting to what I want. Like, I'm looking for the cookie cutter. And so I asked him kind of like, hey, what's the thing? And he goes, oh yeah, there isn't one. And I was like mid-interview, I'm like, okay, then like, how do you make a promo? So the whole time I'm editing this, and I really edited it down because Neil is one of those guys that, as am I, that loves to give more than one example. So that interview was like over an hour long. And I just would like, okay, he made the point, because a lot of times I would then go, oh, me too. And then I would give him like here's another example of that. So I was like, really, the audience is pretty smart. They get it from one example. So I cut that down. But I was still kind of like, it wasn't like, here's how you make a promo. It was insights into why it's not easy to make a promo. And I was kind of like, I don't know if this is going to be like what my audience wanted. I had so many people like, that was a great interview with Neil. And I was like, really? Because the whole time I'm like, not that it was bad. It just wasn't like, oh, step 1, do this. They were like, no, this totally. So it's always fun with content, because the stuff you think is going to do great, it's crickets. And then other things like this, I'm like, I hope this works. And they're like, that was amazing. And I was like, okay.
Funny.
Yeah.
Isn't that funny the way that works? I've done a few of those too. I've interviewed guests on Home Gadget Geeks, and I've been like, oh, that was a bust. And then I get 2 or 3 or 4 pieces of content like, man, that was really awesome. Thanks for doing that. I guess the question, maybe let me ask you this question, Dave. Mm-hmm. How do you know? Because you got to trust your gut on this. Like, and sometimes you'd be like, sometimes you punt, sometimes you can't. I mean, you've done the interview. It's in a slot. You're going to release it. How do you know, like, whether you release that episode or not? I mean, when, I guess maybe the question is, when wouldn't you release the episode?
Oh, that's a great question. I guess and this is where really knowing your audience comes in handy. So in this case, it wasn't that I don't think my audience is going to get anything out of it, because there was some good stuff in there. I just wasn't sure how, like, is this going to score a 6 or an 8? Yeah. And when it came in at a 9, I was like, okay, I didn't expect that. So I've had stuff. I interviewed somebody once who's a major video person. And I said, look, my audience is like pretty much audio. So we're not going to get into f-stops. We're not going to get into lenses. We're not going to we're here to talk about story, because that's why I brought him on. And he's used to being interviewed and talking about lenses and f-stops and things like, and so in the middle, he went into his thing, and I was like, all right. And I just chopped it out. And I was like, all right, so luckily there was still stuff there. We still talked about story, and, but it was one where I was like, yeah, that's okay. If that's what you want.
Have you ever had a guest know that you cut stuff out or said something back to you about that?
Here's the thing, at least from my point of view, Jim, you've been interviewed. Have you ever gone back and listened to the interview?
I have.
You? I do not. I usually go back and listen to what they said before and after. But like, I don't listen to the interview because, well, I was there. Yeah. So, but no, I've never had, and I still have one in the can that's months old that I haven't released, and the person hasn't said, hey, like, where's the interview? Because it's going to take a lot of editing. It was, again, a person that kind of which is a good thing. They over delivered, but I was like, yeah, this is supposed to be, like a 20-minute interview, and they would be like, here's a point, here's the same point again, here's the same point again. I'm like, we just kind of need it the first time. So it's not a bad interview. I'm just going to cut it down because, my audience is smart. They don't need that. So
I actually think there's some good value. Like I went back and listened to last week's episode, maybe Monday or Tuesday on the way into work. And it had been a while since I'd listened to an episode with you and I. And I noticed I was ticking a lot in that. I was doing, that sound that you make when you're thinking. And I just did it right there. I would not have caught that if I hadn't gone back and listened to it. And I thought, oh, okay, I need to be a little more careful. We miss those things when we're doing them live, but it gave me a good indication like, oh, okay, need to watch my audio on that one, be aware of what I'm doing, because that's showing up a lot on this. So I do, not every single episode, but I did go back and listen to the whole thing from last week.
And also that episode had zero editing, like zero. I basically, because it was, again, last weekend was Christmas for me. In fact, it came out, I think, on Monday, not Saturday. And I just ran it through Otter to get my timestamps. I cut off the beginning and the end, ran it through Hindenburg to kind of smooth it out. And that was it. Like, made artwork for it. But in terms of like, because normally I listen to it and I will like really low hanging and things like that, I will cut out. And if I see it, I will, I try to remove them, not always, but,
so that was a good one to listen to from me, because it was completely unedited. So I go back and listen to it and be like, oh, I could have cleaned that up. Now you have to be careful, because if you get too in your head while you're doing this, you start sounding like a drunk sailor, because you're being very intentional about the things that you're saying, right? So I also say right a lot in the things in that context. So again, it's good to go back and review those things. It's
funny. I had a friend of mine point out that mine on this show is and and I'm like, just shut up and figure out what you're going to say before you open your mouth.
It is, though. We're off the cuff here, right?
Yeah.
And so you have to be aware of that. We're not doing this. This is not prepared. We're not some of it is, but we're not spending time thinking through everything that we're going to say. And so it's got that conversational flavor to it. And you're going to get some of that in this kind of style. It's just going to happen.
Yeah.
You can't get it all completely out. Listen, there are those that are gifted who can do that they can do that style first take. It's awesome. And they're just good at speaking. So that does happen too.
Yeah. We did have one quick question here from the chat room from Stefan. He says, does anybody here want to discuss evergreen content versus content with a short minimum durability date?
Ooh,
I think that would be, anything that's short is going to be like a news show, because otherwise you are actually talking about, yesterday's news. And evergreen content can be, especially depending on what you're talking about, like maybe weight loss, but on occasion they come along and they're like, no, eggs are bad for you. And then 6 months later, no, eggs are good. You need to eat eggs. So it's hard to like have evergreen content when the science changes on a regular basis. You're like, wait, wasn't it 6 weeks ago? So, James James Cridlin does. Yeah, does.
Who is this guy?
Does a daily show.
Why do you keep talking about somebody nobody knows anything about?
With news that is kind of interesting if you go back. I'm sure if you go back and listen to, what was the one you mentioned earlier today in Windows, this week in Windows?
Windows Weekly.
Windows Weekly. Right. So if you go back and listen to last year's Windows Weekly, on one hand, you're like, yeah, okay, that was last year. But on the other hand, you kind of get nostalgic. We bought the great nieces and nephews. This is something we started doing. We buy them at least one old toy.
Oh.
And so I had one. I think it's called a Wheelo, and it is you hold it and it's got two kind of wires that are in like a hook. So you have a handle with this thing, and then this plastic wheel has magnets on it that stick on these metal frames, and you hold it upside down and the wheel goes and it rolls down, and then at the bottom they're curved. So it rolls up, and so you pick it back up and it rolls. It's this really, it's basically a fidget spinner from 1960 or whatever.
Before we called them those things.
Yes. And that's why my brother bought it for his granddaughter. And it was fun watching them get completely mesmerized by that. So some old things will transfer, to me, both when she opened it, I was like, oh my God, I haven't seen one of those. And, since I was 8 years old or something like that. But it was funny because it was like, all right, well, it still works though. I want to play with it. No, I want to, they're fighting over this really old toy. So sometimes evergreen content, even if it's outdated, is still kind of entertaining in a way. I just wouldn't, when they're like
the video dates faster than the audio. Like if sometimes you can tell, you've said this before, your voice is a little bit higher in the earlier episodes, right? And so you're like, what am I, 17? Like, when did I record that? So sometimes you can tell. The video, we did some at Gallup. I did some videos from 10 years ago, and we were just talking about this at work. And the content is still very valid, although I've learned a lot more about the topic since then. I mean, 10 years of podcasting, I know a little bit more now than I knew 10 years ago. Listen, even evergreen trees eventually die. They don't live forever. So sometimes you got to start taking that stuff down and redoing it just because it needs to be done in the current vernacular. If you know what I mean. Sometimes we said things that weren't necessarily appropriate 10 years ago, and you're like, oh yeah, I probably shouldn't have said it that way. So sometimes these things need to come down.
Well, especially for gear, if you listen to something from, I don't know, what is this, 2022? So if we go back to 2018, it's going to be like, oh, buy this microphone, buy this mixer, and I'm like, I don't recommend mixers anymore. So that's where you have to kind of, again, going back when I said, when I look at YouTube videos, often I will like, give me something that's a little more current. Yeah. So I don't end up buying something that's a little old in the tooth.
There's no formula for this, right? You have to kind of make your decision. You kind of have to listen to it. Daniel says in chat, he published 2 episodes that refer back to episodes from many years ago and was thrilled that those old episodes were still relevant. And I think you got to check, that's what he says. Go back. Okay. Yeah. These still work. These are still things that'll work for this. I'm going to point to them. May be good to check though. I've gone back and looked at some stuff that should be evergreen from us. And I go, no, that's not going to really work anymore. Yeah. We need to pull those down. Hey, can I get some more coffee?
Oh, you can absolutely get some more coffee.
Would that work? Oh, thank goodness.
Daniel's done his last 2 episodes. It reminds me of what Pat Flynn talked about once. He said when he does his show description, his episode description, they're really detailed. And he said I wanted his notes to be so detailed that somebody could pass a test on whatever the subject was. And I was like, that's an interesting way to look at a show description. And I know if anybody asks me now about, hey, my episodes aren't showing up right in Apple Podcasts, I'm going to go listen to this episode. Just go that like he did this super deep dive into why episodes and blah, blah, blah. And then if somebody says, hey, should I do seasons for my show? I will be like, I don't do seasons. To me, they were made for serial, but if you have more questions, go listen to this episode on seasons. So he's doing these deep dives on one topic, and they're really handy. They're the one I was laughing on episode numbers because Dan was like, I'm so sorry. I know this is confusing. I know this is because it is. It's so I keep forgetting if I go to Podcast Movement and Apple is there, I need to remember to ask them what's the deal with the episode numbers and stuff? Because it all depends on if you're subscribed and where are you looking, and it shows up on the website version of Apple, but not in the app and blah, blah, blah. And so Grady says, I'm going to love his episode in the next couple of weeks about episode artwork and a trick to make it show in Apple Podcasts. Well, there you go. That's interesting. Oh.
Uncle Marv makes a comment. He says, I'm thinking dusting off some old shows by playing a part of the old episode, then giving an update on how things are done now. Does that work for making things evergreen?
Yeah.
Well, it could. I mean, it's certainly new content. I think evergreen is in the eye of the beholder. So you just have to kind of, but if that works, that's a great idea. I mean, especially, you'd mentioned going back. Well, they used to be, I think about my old topic, the host of Home Server Show, the very first podcast I was ever on, just sunset the forums community on December 15th and kind of closed down an era. I mean, that was 13 years of home server content. Well, some of the stuff we were talking about in 2011, Like, people shouldn't have access to it.
Right.
Now. You're like, look, there's other ways to do things at this point. So you know, could we go back? I think, yeah, if you're skilled at editing, you can go back and grab that chunk and replay it and then talk about the way it is today. I think it makes a great show. You know, that gives some context. It tells people how to get caught up. It gives, there's a little bit of nostalgia to it. So, Uncle Marv, I like your idea. I think you should go for it.
I've done that a couple times. I know one was about interviews, and then I had some new information, and then I'm trying to think what the other one was, but I know I've done that a couple times where it's like, hey, I know we've talked I think burnout was another one where I talked about, I know I've revisited like organizing your podcast a few times, because it's like, oh, here's a new tool. If you didn't like this other one, do this or that and go that route. I do know, since it is almost the end of the year, in my head, I'm telling myself I might try a year-end review. And this would be somehow either recording separately, like a one-sentence summary. Like when I do, if I talk someplace, I try to boil my presentation down to one sentence. And then every slide should reinforce that sentence. So I remember once I spoke at Podcast Movement, and the sentence was, every podcast can benefit from editing. And then every slide reinforced that statement. And I thought, either take something from the show or just record the focus sentence for either that segment or that episode or whatever it is. And then make that like, hey, here's what we talked about in 2022. And the reason that idea is in my head is, I said earlier, the one show I listened to, they kind of did a best of, like, here's what you learned this year or the last couple of years. And I was like, The fun thing is, if you want to do that, you need to, like, every week, because otherwise, if you try to do it in December, if you try to do a wrap up, you're going to end up spending more time, because you're like, oh, I'm going to save time this week. I'm just going to do a wrap up. Well, going back and finding all the clips, if you're going to use clips or whatever, is going to take twice as much time as a regular episode. So if that's something you want to do, I know I kind of laugh. I do the whole, what's your favorite podcast thing, and thinking that people will send it in ahead of time and then I'll have it done. But anytime I do a question of the month, it's a ton of work to get everybody's volume the right thing. And, then people, which is always nice, I'm not complaining, but people will leave their answer and then they'll leave like, oh, by the way, Dave, and then they'll just leave me a personal message. Well, that's got to get cut out. So it's always kind of fun. But if that's something you're thinking of, that's going to take some discipline. I know I've thought about it like probably 5 different years. I'm like, I should do that. That would be cool. And then about May, you're like, oh, yeah, I was supposed to be doing a year-end clip thing for the thing. And then I didn't do it. So keep that in mind.
It does, somewhere, if you're doing transcripts, this is where it can really pay off for you. If you put like I would think in my show, I might in the transcripts put pro tip, like pro tip, colon, and then right in front of the section on stuff. Then I could go back into each individual episode, search for pro tip, and it would take me right to the spot in the moment where I thought, or, maybe there's going to be a couple of those. But that does require you going back and listening to the whole thing again. If you're doing that already, if you're an editing kind of person and you're doing that already, you're kind of designed for this. At Gallup, I have my editor do these pull quotes. We just find 3 quotes per episode. He pulls them out. That's why they're called pull quotes. We put them up to the top of the show notes, and they have a timestamp on them.
Oh,
if I ever want to go back and like, hey, what did we talk about in this? Or what are the important parts of this? It's ready made. I mean, I could next year, and I may even do this next year, I could spend the whole year. I don't even need to interview anybody. We have so much content that's good over the last couple years. I could just put shows together that combine, thoughts or ideas or, those kinds of pieces and reuse that content. But having those tips, I think, are important. So, you can speed up. Otherwise, you got to go back and listen to most of the episode again. Yeah,
that's the key. Having the timestamp would make that a heck of a lot easier. You could just open it up, go right to it, copy, paste, you're done. Uncle Marv says here about, if you just rerun a show without adding new content, he says a lot of podcasters replay episodes that kind of feels kind of lazy. I'm with you on that. My shows are about tech. I think there's value in updating the episode rather than just repeating. I've never understood hey, here's a show I did from 2004. Enjoy. Okay, like I didn't need you. If I'm subscribed to your show and that episode's in my feed, I could have just gone and clicked on it, which makes me think either A, you didn't write a very good title to make me want to click it, or why not just put out an episode that says, hey, there's no episode this week. If you subscribe to the show, because that'll get people to follow/subscribe, here's some of the episodes from, a year or so ago, and then spit out those really I want to click that kind of titles and get people to listen to your back catalog. That's I know a lot of people struggle with that. And I think that's just maybe one of those things where maybe people don't know that they can scroll down and find other ones. But I've never, anytime somebody says, hey, here's a replay from such and such, I'm like, okay, because if I'm a regular listener, I've already heard that one. So,
well, but the Radio Lab folks do this all the time, where they'll be like, hey, there's a situation going on right now. And we recorded this episode 4 years ago that has some information about it. So they'll replay that in whole. I think it's mostly whole. They may cut out a few parts of it, but it's mostly in whole. And then they'll come back and add five minutes to the end of it, or ask some questions or whatever. I think that's appropriate to play the whole thing.
That's the Uncle Marv thing, right? It's older content, but it's got an update to it. And I could see that. I know Mark.
But they'll play the whole episode. So, because Dave, listen, I'm not scrolling back. I'm not doing the thinking like, oh yeah, recently the Supreme Court made a really important decision, right? And changed some things. I'm not thinking like, oh, I wonder if Radio Lab talked about that 4 years ago, so I'm not scrolling back. So that's where it may be helpful for those kinds of where they know to add value to say, we talked about this and here's a reminder of what that means. Right.
I know Mark Maron always, anytime somebody died that he interviewed, he'd always like, hey, because his stuff is behind a paywall.
Right.
So he'd be like, hey, we lost a good one this week. Richard Belzer died, whatever. I interviewed him back. And a lot of times he'll add like a story. Like, hey, I remember this one time, Belzer and I did such and such. It was great and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, here's my talk with Richard Belzer, RIP. So it's always like he adds a little more, and it's, but the other thing is, in theory, that's just good old playing in traffic. If somebody dies, it's going to be in the news and people are going to be searching for it. Why not see if I can't get my show to show up and capitalize on someone's death?
Well, honor them. Well, let's say it that way. We're honoring them. A retrospective is what they call that in the news business.
And it's very much that, I should say. I don't want to.
Yeah.
There are people that will. Libsyn had a developer got killed by a drunk driver, and it actually sucked kind of the life out of me for a minute. Yeah. Because he was 46 and had kids. But here's the thing that got me when I searched for his name, because I just got a thing from HR. Hey, we lost BJ Forsyth. And I searched like, how did he die? And there were people that are literally like had AI scraping obituaries to rewrite a page and then just litter it with ads. And I was like, wow, you are actually capitalizing on someone's death. And I was like,
that's the definition of a douchebag.
Yes.
Right there. Right.
You look it up.
Come on.
Yeah. And then there was one guy that even was reading the badly written AI obituary on YouTube with comments turned off and advertising turned on. And I was like, there's a special place in hell for you, my friend. That was interesting. There is I haven't played with it yet. I'm trying to find it. If you hear people talk, we'll just talk. I've just announced this. I have a link here, but it's not. And we'll see what happens here. Let me throw this out. You'll hear people talk about OP3 stats. And what this is, it's part of the whole podcasting 2.0 thing. Oh, that's a bummer. I have a link in my notes here. Like, here, use this link. And when I went to it, it's a 404. But if you hear people talk about OP3 stats, it is part of this new, not so much new, like it's an alternative to IAB, although it kind of is, but it's a bunch of nerds playing with stats. There we go. That's what it is. And they're trying to see if they can come up with maybe something a little more what's the word I want to say here? I don't want to say reliable, but there are
Helpful?
yeah. One of the things that's happened here. Yeah. One of the things that happened twice this year is the one was the, the Android app. Samsung had an app and it featured people and it downloaded a bunch of their shows. So it caused a spike for some people, but yet they were all counted as IAB stats, even though they kind of weren't listened to. There was another one. Amazon did a thing in April where they kind of did a test and it wasn't supposed to do that. And those were all. So there are times when IAB, not that they're inaccurate, but it's like, okay, there's a loophole here where we can kind of make downloads look legit when they're not. And
that's a bug though. That's a bug, right?
Yeah.
Where IAB set it up in one way and then, a certain situation happened they didn't anticipate, which caused an overcounting in there. Nobody meant to do this.
Right.
They're all mistakes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Jim, I know a couple months ago, you were talking about different things you were doing with your show and you weren't sure how this was going to work or that. As we've now, we're coming into January. Any new thoughts on your show?
Yeah, that's a good question. I kind of decided I wanted the show to be about helping people and I need to stop worrying so much about how I was going to do that. I've got plenty of co-hosts that can jump in there and do it. And I just enjoyed as long as I continue to focus on, it's like this show. I think we try to help people, right? Mm-hmm. That's the goal of this, is to jump in just to try and help people with the collective wisdom about the community and some of the things that we've learned. And so, I'm kind of set to go forward in 2023. It's hard to believe we're thinking about that. Kind of set in 2023. I don't know if I'm going to change a lot with it. It just reinforced the fact I still want to keep doing this. I wanted to do it to help people, get guests on that do that. I'm not going to hit it every single week, but most of all, just have fun.
Yeah.
Just have fun with it. I don't know. What about you? Have you, when you think about 2023, anything you're thinking about doing differently or adding to?
I want to come up, and it's treating it like another podcast, but I want to be more consistent on YouTube. And I had written off TikTok because I'd gone to that conference where an actual marketing team they showed some of their stuff. It was good. Like, these are, they're marketing people. They got degrees in that stuff. And they spent years on TikTok. And somebody said, well, what's the ROI? Can you tie any success in your company to the, years you spent on TikTok? And their answer was, nothing, zero. We cannot tie anything to TikTok. And I was like, now they had, in some cases, lots of viewers and subscribers, but in terms of what's it doing for your business? And I had a member of the School of Podcasting. Now he's a pilot and he's doing the thing where he's kind of down in the bottom right-hand corner. He's talking over a video behind him and it's all sorts of planes with flames and flying and you know what I mean? So it was and his stuff is going viral. And I said, okay, well, are you tying it to anything? He goes, yeah. He goes, book sales. He's cause he has kind of a Linktree thing. And he goes, that website has gone up. And he goes, and I've just noticed that I'm getting more book sales. Now, can I tie them directly to TikTok? Yeah. No, he goes, but it's one of those what's changed? Oh, I started doing TikTok and some of his stuff, 10, 15, 20,000 views on a TikTok. And so I need to go watch his channel and see what his call to action is. Cause I've always heard that every social media platform kind of gets a little hey, can you do us a favor and not send people away from Twitter and TikTok? And when you start telling people, hey, go over here, their job is to keep you on their platform. So I'm going to be interested to see, how do you tell people to go do something not on TikTok without, having TikTok go, yeah, we're not going to show that anymore. So I'll have to look into that. I did it fairly consistent for a month. So in all reality, I didn't really give it a good try. And I had a decent system. And for a while there, I again just went, okay, everybody else is just talking into their phone. So I think I'll just try talking into my phone. And that was fine. We'll see. I know there's a bill just went through Congress. And one of the things on the year-end spending, blah, blah thing, there's a thing that said Congress or people in Congress or the government can't have TikTok on their phones. So I'll be interested to see what that means. I may have also accidentally just killed off Richard Belzer. I really thought he was dead. I guess he's not.
Apparently still alive.
So if you're in the car listening to this going, man, I love Belzer. Well, guess what? It's a Christmas miracle. He's alive. Yeah.
He's back from the dead.
Gary says you need 1,000 followers on TikTok before you can add a URL in your profile. I actually have a URL on my profile. I did that from like day one. Maybe it's in the, I'll have to go back and look. Maybe they changed it. But yeah, I just know, I mean, it was taking me 20 minutes to do, a 45-second video. And it's just like, again, these are the things you have to go, is this helping me get towards, and the problem is all those things. Gary Arndt was on my show and said he quit doing social media. He goes, it did nothing to his numbers. He goes, nothing. He goes, now, do those help? Sure. He goes, but it's such a trickle. So all these are kind of like,
why? But I think that depends on who you are. Like, if you're not putting a lot into social and you leave it, I mean, that's like a tree falling in the forest and no one's there to hear it. Doesn't make a sound.
Yeah.
So, but if you're, I mean, some folks have a lot of influence on these social media platforms and they can move the needle with things.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, well, exactly. That's me talking after a month. So again, that's like,
totally.
If I was coaching myself, I'd be like, dude, you did it for a month. Come on now. DR says my little brother quit his 9 to 5 and is totally monetized on TikTok. He's got 500,000 followers. That's cool.
Yeah.
It makes me worried.
TikTok, here's the future of TikTok. They're going to do the exact same thing that YouTube did, right? There's all these monetization things going on right now.
Right.
But I don't know if it'll be in 2023, but there's going to be a haircut involved in this at some point where TikTok goes, yeah, I know we've been paying you at these rates, but that's not sustainable. So you're going to need to show TikTokers, just be aware this, history will repeat itself. And we've already seen this on YouTube for sure. I think there'll be something coming and it'll be brutal. Like it will absolutely be brutal. So just be aware, this isn't real money. The potential is this isn't going to be the real money that we think it is right now. And there could be a haircut coming for sure.
Daniel says, let's all remember the guy who was big on Blab. Yes.
What was his name? Wouldn't he sleep or something?
Yeah,
Didn't he go to jail? I think he went, no names. Let's not mention any names.
Yeah.
I don't want any liable on that. Dave, we have a show. We have our flagship podcast to Gallup coming up on 1 million downloads. It'll happen in the first 2 months, maybe of 2023. So it'll be fun to celebrate. 1 million of anything's kind of a big deal. So, it took us 10 years to get there. It's a super niche audience. So like, I don't have those high expectations that it'll ever be 1 million a year. Yeah, no, you never know, but that'll be fun to celebrate in 2023.
Yeah. So that's for me, that, and I'm looking forward to, I don't know exactly what my role is going to be at Libsyn as the podcast education guy, but I am I want to get in front of more podcasters on a one-on-one basis. That's why I changed things at the School of Podcasting. We're now, we're doing coaching without calendars and this all sorts of fun stuff like that. Not that I don't like working in groups, but I'd rather have a road that's, an inch long, but a mile deep than a mile wide and an inch deep. I'd rather go deep with people. So we'll see. I hear DR says, wait till TikTok is going to get into podcast. Yeah, whatever that means. Yeah, I'll be interested to see what YouTube. Remember, they've been hinting, they have the page now for YouTube podcasting and yada, yada, yada. So we'll.
Not to be a prediction show. We're not predicting anything.
No, I predict, I will piggyback on Adam Curry's. Did I say this last week? Maybe not, but Adam Curry said, here's what's going to happen. AI, everybody's going to jump on the AI bandwagon. It's going to create subpar content. It's going to suck. And people will blame podcasting for it. Because I saw a tool that had pretty realistic voice stuff where you could just type something and the whole thing was it could show emotions, and they showed it. Like there was a girl and now she's yelling and now she's sad and this whole 9 yards. And I could see people going to Chat GPT or whatever it is, getting their script, throwing it into this, letting, Marsha the robot read it for you, put it out and go, this podcasting thing sucks. And I'm like, yeah, well, A, the robot doesn't really have a personality. B, the content that you got it from, again, it's, I remember I had a high school teacher that had a few things he said to me that I was like, huh. And he was talking about, because he's helping us get jobs. And he said, remember, don't steal from your boss. He goes, that's a really bad idea. And he goes, I'll just leave you with this. If there was a way to steal and not get caught, he goes, don't you think somebody would have found it by now? And I'm like, that's a good point. It's like, yeah, you might be the person. I know there's always Congress, but, there's a joke there somewhere. But I would just go, if there was a way to make $1 million on the internet by just simply clicking a button, like, don't you think they would have invented it by now?
Yeah, but I'll counter that a little bit. I mean, there are some times when some new things like TikTok come around that have a monetization that you can, and there are people making legitimate, coin out there doing it. And so the hard part is you never really know. You got to try. Right. I hate to poo-poo these. I made a foray, is that the right word, into Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, and and I'm still doing some of it. Some of it's paid off. Like you're like, oh, okay. I mean, a little bit of money turned into more money. And you're kind of like, okay, that's pretty cool. Now, obviously I haven't retired, so it's not like, obviously I'm still hanging out with you guys on Saturday mornings.
Well, that's what Daniel says. Yeah. He says, hang on. If someone had found a way to steal and not be caught, then by its very nature, we wouldn't know about it. Well, that's true. That's a good point.
Let's not get too logical now, Daniel. Let's not get too logical.
Well, and to, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about the fact that somebody tips you 2112 Satoshis, that like it's 40 cents. And somebody emailed us and said, yeah, it's 40 cents today. If crypto does what it's supposed to do, 10 years from now, that 40 cents might be $5. And I was like, yeah, good point. So we'll see.
The dollar also, anyways, let's not get into that. Let's not get into that. The point is, you don't know, right? You don't know going into some of these things. And I think it's always just, it's kind of a dynamic. You got to go with some things that you think, you got to take some risks. You got to try some stuff, but by all means, have fun with it while you're doing it. I mean, do it because you find it interesting. Do it because, you don't want to lose sleep over these kinds of things. You don't want to, be ill over some of this stuff. So be healthy.
Yeah.
I guess maybe as you're doing this.
All right.
We all have enough stress in our lives.
We'll wrap up here with a final anchor question. I need to move some episodes. Well, you can't move some. You're going to move them all. There's no unless you want to move them there and then delete them. Move episodes from Anchor to Red Circle. I know. Fire into the frying pan. Yeah, it's kind of like, okay, but they're not my episodes. Surely someone has come up with the idea of not losing your downloads. Now, you can not lose your audience, kinda. That's what the whole 301 redirect is for. But in terms of how do I keep my stats, not gonna lose. So take a screenshot or something. I know Buzzsprout says you can take your stats, but what you're doing is you're just filling out you're basically taking your old stats and putting it into their dashboard, but they're not. Like, you can't drill down on those stats. It's just a number. But no, that's it. And I did find out.
12 o'clock.
And I did find out that in the past I've said how you can't do a 301 from Kajabi. Kajabi now does a 301 redirect, but boy, do they hork it up, because when you import your stuff into Kajabi, they change it so that if you try to move back to your old media host, you'll create a ton of duplicates, proving once again that Kajabi has no idea what to do when it comes to podcasting. I was like, holy cow. So, well, Jim, I'm assuming you're not doing an episode this week, or what's the deal?
Yeah, no, we took the week off. It was Christmas, so it was just a good excuse to not do it. But my daughter's joining me on the live show this coming Thursday, the one who knitted this hat. We'll catch up with her.
Nice.
I'd love some folks to come out. It's a holiday weekend. Come out and join us live. TheAverageGuy.tv/live, Thursday, 8 p.m. Central.
Awesome. And as we talked about earlier, again, if you haven't done it, do it now, because I'm jumping on it as soon as we get off here. If I get done with the Ask the Podcast Coach, school@podcasting.com/question for the live audience. I will be playing all these clips of what's my favorite podcast and why. So that will be coming up on the School of Podcasting. And then in January, I'll probably do the typical how to start a podcast. That's usually the first episode, followed by, I think the question of the month for January is going to be, what are your pet peeves? Like, what drives you nuts in a podcast? That's always a good one to hear people that are like, please quit putting 7 ads at the beginning of your show.
7 15-second ads.
Yes.
That doesn't go over very well. Is that what you're saying?
Well, that too. Yeah, don't do that either. But I did see where Joe Rogan is not quite as bad as, like, he'll put like 3 ads back to back, but it used to be like he had 7 minutes of ads at the beginning of his show, and they are now hooking people in, and then they'll put like, here's 3 ads and then another 10 minutes and here's another 3 ads and things like that. But Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to everyone, and Jim's going to go roast some chestnuts on the fire behind him, and exactly. So, and next Saturday, are we here? Right? Yeah. We'll be here next Saturday.
Sure we're here. Yeah, it'll be New Year. Was it New Year's Day?
I think.
What is the?
But we'll be here. We're out of music. We'll just
New Year's Eve. It's New Year's Eve. We'll see you next week,
All right.
everybody.